I'm going to be one of those individuals who are going to be a little bit against the grain, because I come from a different environment, and I'm dismayed in some cases by the approach in which we've taken the last couple years, and recognizing that somehow in the solution set, the model of yesterday is going to somehow pull us out of the problem that we found ourselves. And I use as an example the third point in which Dr. Reich brought up, and that is the crisis that we found ourselves in when we no longer were able to support the style of living in which we expected. We created an opportunity to increase our debt. Well, we've increased our debt threefold in less than a year. And the money that you're talking about is my money. It's my grandchildren's money. And we're not doing it very responsibly. And regardless of whether or not we think that somehow those dollars are going to be applied in a fashion that will somehow pull us out of this thing, I think we're losing it. We're missing the mark because there are no metrics that show that that dollar is being spent in the fashion that allowed the TVA, for example, or the WPA to build more than 1,100 miles of highway, 3 major hydro dams, put more than 12.5 million people to work. I don't see those metrics in this $700 billion of stimulus. So I think we really have to go back to the basics and understand that in the fashion of globalization, things have changed. The model's different. Where we are in the expectation of privilege that we've created as an opportunity needs to be re-examined. Those issues associated with it are a national security issue. And I would point in particular to education. In America's universities and institutions of higher learning, American students are now the least, in some cases, prepared to take the technological leap that will keep this nation in the forefront of globalization. And any one of us, and I've only been in the higher education business now for a year, but I have other members who are part of this, is that about 35 to 40% of our population requires some form of remedial education when they enter the school of higher education. 80% of our students within the education system have no interest in the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. They are the forefront to advancing technological advanced companies. They're exactly what Dr. Reich is talking about. And if you don't have a population that truly is excited about learning mathematics, engineering, and technology, how do you get them to the next level? How does America advance itself? And I'm not exactly sure, Lorena, and I don't mean to be argumentative, but I will be.
I wasn't supposed to go first.
I know.
That's true.
In the premise that somehow, if you work hard, you're less advantaged in your children to succeed. Or that if you have to be out of the workforce, or if you have to be in the workforce, somehow your child will not be able or be as advantaged as others with privilege. I come from a family in which I put myself through college. My dad served two tours in Vietnam, and for most of my influential portion of my life was not around. But I've worked very hard in order to get there, and I expect the same thing of my children as they go through those processes. And how much you're involved, I'm sorry. I think we owe more, or more responsibility is due to the education system than just saying somehow that the privilege is equated to affluence or their abilities. And I think that there's a lot of folks who have actually gone down that road to say that our underprivileged students, our underprivileged population somehow can't succeed. And we've almost given them that example and told them you can expect not to succeed. Well, I think that the military is a perfect example of how that truly is not the case. I joined the military 33 years ago, in which we had segregated berthing, race riots, never saw a person of color above the main decks. We were restricted in the abilities to be able to go into certain ratings because they just simply weren't equal to that challenge. And in 30 years, we've transformed that. And these are the same kids who came in the beginning. It's just how much emphasis do you put in their ability to be able to succeed? And I think Chicago model is exactly it. The magnet schools have provided those opportunities, and I think that we truly do have to focus our attentions in those places. So I think that there's an opportunity, and I think that when I was in service yet, that Major General Mike Leonard and myself represented what is $27 billion to your local economy, minimized by most in the San Diego region. Recognizing that your unemployment is where it is because it's not as bad as the rest of the state, because $27.8 billion is coming from the Department of Defense to maintain and hold up the economy of Southern California. More Department of Defense dollars are spent in the county of San Diego than any other county in the entire United States. There are more Department of Defense employees. This is the largest single concentration of military forces in the world in San Diego County. A lot of people don't know that. We have the second largest population of federal employees in the country outside of Washington, D.C. Those factors are not part of the solution set, and the encouragement to be able to do some of those things are not part of. And I would tell you that one of the last piece that I'll bring into as an example is I think that in some cases, Mike Leonard and I started to refer to business in California as what we called the ABC. And we were informing our senior leadership that the right decision was ABC, anywhere but California. And the reason being was because the system is not progressive enough to allow us the opportunity to execute our mission requirement without being dragged through the mud for the better part of 4 and 5 years. And the realization of those type of efforts while we are, and I'm one of those guys who have been labeled as, the tree hugger of the Navy. And I don't have a problem with that. I've created more renewable energy and anything else in my 12 years as a flag officer, and now continue that effort at USD. But I do believe that that's the future, and I do believe that renewable energies and green resources are additionally a national security issue. If we do not figure out how to do it, if those of you who are history buffs, the 20th century was a bloody century. And 80% of the conflicts across the 20th century evolved around economic challenges. If we do not recognize that the industrial world is moving and shifting to the Pacific Rim at 4 times the growth that we saw the 20th century evolve, that our conflicts in energy will make the 21st century potentially the most bloodiest century in human mankind. So we better wake up and figure out how to get there. It is a serious issue. And I think that the heart of San Diego is there. We've become one of the leaders in getting there, but we still have some amazing challenges. I just installed a 1.24 megawatt. USD is now the second largest producer of renewable energy of all college campuses across the country. And in 1 year, we have put together a 1.24 megawatt photovoltaic system, which we tripped the trigger just the other day, and we're very proud of that. The real issue is I would much rather have preferred that to be a 7 megawatt event, and we have the capacity to do 7 megawatts. Legislation written in the 70s prohibits us from taking the next step. So we need to be able to go back and look at what those efforts are and what models worked in the 20s and 30s, 40s and 50s that will not work in our effort to become more independent of oil and create greener jobs, reuse the opportunities for urbanization that surrounds itself about a sustainable future. So I think that the challenge is huge. I think a lot of what Secretary Reich said is very correct, but I think we need to examine ourselves first before we move forward, because I think that we're still using the same model.
So the Health Institute has been around for about a year as an entity. Two local entrepreneurs and philanthropists, Gary and Mary West, have committed up to $100 million to the Health Institute via their foundation. And the one vision and focus that we do have is how do we solve the escalation of healthcare costs in the US? How do we really shift the agenda, create a new industry within wireless health, which can help create jobs, economic growth, but also solve the cost problem, which I think is another factor which is going to affect US competitiveness as time goes on. And we're going to do that in a couple of ways. So first of all, innovation. We have just released our first prototype of a product, which is a wireless medical device. We will also commercialize products, not directly, given we're a non-profit, but we can spin things out into another entity. We're also going to invest in technologies and entrepreneurs that fulfill our vision. We will conduct validation type trials, again, to show how these solutions can save costs. And then finally, we're going to do a lot of advocacy work in DC, which we already have started, to shift the policy agenda to cost reduction. So that in a nutshell is us. I'm going to be the optimist on the, on the panel. So I've lived in a couple of countries, and the US can always reinvent itself. The meritocracy that I see here, I haven't seen anywhere else. The social mobility that I see here is non-existent in Europe. I know 20-year-olds who are starting companies here, and again, that doesn't happen in other places I've been. So as the background, let's look at what new industries and technology can really do. My bias is on education and growth really being derived from innovation. So look at biotechnology 20 years ago and fast forward now. There are hundreds of companies within this space, thousands of jobs created, and billions of dollars of value created. And my focus now at West is on the wireless health paradigm, and we're at a similar stage as where biotech was 20 years ago. So that as a macro topic, let's talk about San Diego. So I've lived in London, Boston, DC, Bay Area, and I moved here particularly because of the ecosystem that is getting cultivated here. To really perpetuate this new paradigm, I think you need a wireless and telecoms input, which we have here. You need a healthcare IT services input, which you have here. You need a medical device perspective, which you have here. So given the unique ecosystem which is developed here within those industries, plus everything more in terms of the research institutes, the world-class health institutions, the non-profit piece, I think the opportunity is really great over the next 5-10 years for San Diego to be the global center of healthcare innovation and then really shift the argument towards cost reduction as well as improved outcomes. So I moved here. There's a bunch of other people who are also moving here as part of the Institute, and I think it'll be really interesting to follow this story over the next 5 years.